Okay, hello. Welcome to Math Skills number 7.13, 7.13. We've got an A and we've got a B. These ones are asking us to increase and decrease base numbers by a percentage. Now, the easy mistake to make when we see something like increase 50 by 10% is to think, well, okay, I should take 50 and I should add 10 to it, and that will give me 60, right? We need to remember when we're doing questions like this that percents scale. They scale based on the base number. So 10% of 50 is going to be much smaller than 10% of 60. And 10% of 60 is going to be smaller than 10% of 70. So if we just add a straight 10, we're not going to end up with our right number. So let's work through this one step at a time. The question asks us to increase 50 by 10%. The first thing we need to do there is to find out what 10% of 50 is. And the way that we find out how to see what 10% of a base number is, or any percent of a base number, is to multiply that base number by the decimal version of the percent. So we're going to take our base number, 50, and we are going to multiply it by the decimal version of 10%. Easiest way to see the decimal version of any percent is just to divide it by 100. We can do that on our calculator. For instance, we can do 10 divided by 100. 0.1 gave it to us nice and easy. If we have our calculator on hand, we could do that. But who needs to do that when we have a nice nifty trick like grabbing the imaginary decimal that's at the end of every whole number and moving it to the left 2 decimal places. So it's now here, and we can see it's 0.10, or in other words, 0.1. So the decimal version of 10% is 0.10, also known as 0.1. I'll write 0.10 right now just because it helps us keep track of exactly what we're doing. But those of you who know that there are infinite imaginary zeros after every decimal know that it's the same as just having it as 0.1. But let's just keep things simple. So 50 times the decimal version of the percent, this is going to tell us what 10% of 50 is, because we want to increase our base number 50 by 10% of itself. So let's see what that is. 50 times 0.10. I'm going to put it into my trusty calculator. 50 times 0.10 gives us 5. Okay, so 10% of 50 is 5. But that's not our answer. Not yet, because it wants us to increase 50 by 10% of itself. So I know that 10% of 50 is 5. Now I just need to increase 50 by 5. And the way I do that is good old addition. 50, oh, I've just given you the answer by accident. I'm getting ahead of myself. 50, our base number, plus 5 equals 55. So 55 is going to be our final answer, and all of our final answers get circled in nice bright red, so whoever's reading and grading can see exactly what we intended to show as our answer. There we go. So increase 50 by 10%. First, we found out what was 10% of 50. We did, to do that, our base number, 50, times the decimal version of the percent, 50 times 0.10. Calculator told us 5, and then we added that 10% of 50 onto the base number. 50 plus 5 equals 55. Now, there is a shortcut that some of you may know, but should I show you that yet? I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that for when we are calculating tax. There's a quick little shortcut that saves us this last step, but if we just do this in a 2-step process, it keeps it straight ahead and very straightforward, and I'm not going to confuse things right now. So, there is our increase question. Let's look at our decrease question. So it's going to start off exactly the same. Decrease 30 by 10%. Just like our increase question, we still need to know, well, what is 10% of 30? I can't just do 30 minus 10, well, because this percent, it's not 10 whole numbers, it's 10% of 30. So 30 minus 10 would not give us our answer because, 10% of 30 is different than 10% of 40, which is different from 10% of 50. So we can't just minus the 10 as it is. It won't work for us. We are going to take our base number and we are going to use that to find out what is 10% of 30. Now, just like over here, we remember we have to multiply our base number by the decimal version of the percent in order to find out what 10% of 30 is. So the decimal version of 10%, we remember from over here, 0.10. And if I throw that into my calculator, which I always have on hand, 30 times 0.10, 3. So 10% of 30 is 3. But this question wasn't asking what is 10% of 30. This question wants us to decrease 30, our base number, by 10% of itself. We just found that 10% of 30 is 3, so now I have to decrease 30 by 3. Now over here, when I wanted to increase the base number by that percent of itself, I used addition. So what do you think we're going to use for when we want to decrease? We are going to use subtraction, the opposite of addition. We are going to minus. We're going to take that base number, 30, and we're going to minus what we found was 10% of itself. 30 minus 3. If I throw that into my calculator, lots of us can do it in our heads, but if you can't, that's okay. 30 minus 3 is 27. Always good to check your answer on the calculator, even if you think you have it in your head. It'd be a shame if you did everything right except for that last little step and you missed the grade just because of that. We circle our answers in red, and we are good to go, as they say. So, to sum this up once and for all, when we are increasing or decreasing a base number by a percent, we can't just minus that percent right away because we need to know what is the percent of that base number. So we found what was 10% of the base number by multiplying the base number by the decimal version of the percent. 50 times 0.10 equals 5, or 30 times 0.10 equals 3. And then we use that to either add if we were increasing or subtract if we were decreasing. So increase 50 by 10% of itself. Well, 50 plus 10% of 50, which is 5, gave us 55. And here decrease 30 by 10%. 30, our base number, minus decrease 10% of itself, which we found was 3. 30 minus 3 equals 27. So that's how we ended up with those two numbers. And now you know exactly how to do it. Good luck.